warming your audience up is such a big part of the launch process. And a lot of people come up with their Patreon idea in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Mistake in sequential order of how this goes. Mistake number one that they hit is they come up with their idea in 1 second. They don't validate it. So they don't actually talk to their audience. They don't make sure that this is what their audience wants. They don't check in. They don't say, hey, would you pay this much for this perk? Hey, do you want this perk? Hey, is there something I'm missing that you'd really like to see? They just put it out there and assume it's exactly what their audience wants. And sometimes it isn't. So that's mistake number one.
Live the life you love.
What's going on, y'all? Today's guest is Katie Zaccardi. She is back. Her goal is to help women in the music industry build sustainable music careers and multiply their income without stress and self-doubt. This is the second time we have Katie on the show. Last time was episode number 95, where we focused mostly on that mental health aspect for musicians, which makes sense why she's still very focused on helping you build an income, but building it with a very low stress and no self-doubt, right? With a strong mindset going into building your business. This was such a fun conversation. I always have a good time chatting with Katie. In this episode, we talk about Patreon, email sequences, but most importantly, before you launch your Patreon and your email list and building your email list, you need to have a launch strategy, which we get into today as well, or in this episode, right? This episode is a great continuation from last week's episode with Isabella Bedoya. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out yet, definitely make sure to check that out. It's episode number 132. If you're listening to this in the future, right? So it wasn't really last week if you're listening to that in the future, but episode 132 with Isabella Bedoya was really, really good. We talked a lot about, if you look at the funnel, right, we talked a lot about the awareness and education stage with Isabella. And today we kind of get a little bit from the education to the opt-in to the building a loyal fan stage, which is, where you really build a career and really build a future for yourself, which Katie is really, really focused on teaching independent musicians and how to build a lucrative business for themselves. Along with helping women in music, she has an amazing podcast called Out to Be, the Out to Be podcast, which I'll include the link to our episode in the show notes as well, and then just a link to her podcast in general. Definitely check that out and subscribe to her show. She's a singer-songwriter and offers some amazing courses for musicians who want to learn more about marketing, list building, and launching their next project. And she has a course that she's done with Bree Noble, who has been on the podcast as well. So and it looks like they might be launching something else in the future. So it'd be awesome to get the two of them back on the show once that is out there for the world. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and I'd love to engage with y'all in the comments. If you have any questions, any thoughts, I would love to answer questions for y'all. If you have any requests for future content, future guests, please let me know as well. Really try to allow first the patrons, then the email subscribers, and then anybody, open fair game to help direct the direction of the YouTube channel and the podcast, because it's out there for you guys. If it's not for me. I don't make any money off of this. Hopefully one day, we'll get enough patrons to support the show, and we can do this full time and have several shows and maybe other shows during the week. But this is for y'all. So you tell me what you want to hear, what kind of guests you want to hear, what kind of topics you want to cover on the YouTube channel. We're doing quick tips on Tuesdays now on YouTube. So check out the channel. Go to makingitwithchrisg.com and see all the links to everything there, to all the social media platforms and our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel. We're really trying to hit the 1,000 subscribers over there. But enough of the call to actions. Holy shit, I have a shit ton today. Well, let's go on to the most important thing of the episode, to our wonderful, amazing guest who has lots of great insight to share with all of you. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with the amazing Katie Zaccardi. All right, we are live. I'm excited to welcome back Katie Zaccardi. Katie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure to do a second round because we can go so much deeper than we ever go the first round.
Exactly. And we skip all the intro stuff as well, which is
yes.
Nice. It's nice to hear the backstory, but it's nice we can just dive right on in. But a little bit of backstory, I guess. Last time we talked on my podcast was 2019, fall in 2019. So it was before the global pandemic. We've talked a lot about mental health, which is probably more useful for people to listen to than we expected. But how has things affected you? Like, how has your business shifted? How has the pandemic affected you since we've talked last time on this show, at least?
Yeah, so a lot has changed actually. So when I came on last time, like you said, we were talking about mental health, and I was really focused on being a wellness coach at that time. That's how I got into the industry. Although, of course, I had background in pretty much every area, but I really wanted to make an impact on that front because that's what I was really passionate about. Since the pandemic, we still focus on that, and I still focus on that a ton in my business, but I was craving it, and my clients were craving really well-rounded support because, like so many people experience, a lot of my clients were changing jobs, leaving jobs, shifting, going more full-time in music, wanting to increase their income, and experiencing stress, uncertainty, mindset blocks given everything that was going on. So it was a little bit of a transition period in 2020, but from 2020, I basically made the pivot from just being a wellness coach. And I don't say just as in it's bad, because I'm actually very grateful that I was able to make the pivot because so many wellness coaches for musicians have popped up, which is incredible. But what I mean is I've really come into what I wanted to do, which was being a business coach for musicians, music teachers, and music coaches. And I take a very holistic approach where we discuss strategy, mindset, and wellness. So it's just as in now it's just coming into the whole. Before we were dealing more of just it being the part. And now with my clients, we really have that be a part of the whole so that they can create sustainable music careers and make money. So that is a little bit of an update. We're full in the business coaching now. We're running with it, and it's been a lot of fun.
I saw you have it looks like you have a course with Bree Noble. Is that right? Do y'all have a partnership together?
So I am an affiliate for one of Bree Noble's courses, her course Rock Your Next Release, which is all on releasing an album. I promote that because I think that's a great course as well if you're looking to release music. So yeah, and Bree and I are always collaborating. So actually I'm going to tease to stay tuned because we always have collaborations coming up, and there might be something big coming in the future, but I cannot say anymore.
Might be. Which means there is something big coming in the future. So you'll definitely have to share that with me once
Maybe
it's ready.
not. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just making things up.
So maybe we'll have to do a round 3 to share about that, or at least share the info once it comes out. I'd love to share that with my audience.
Definitely.
So when you reached out about Patreon, which is something I have been a champion of for quite a while, or at least a subscription model, but especially in the last year, I think, especially since the pandemic, really, I've really become an advocate and a champion for Patreon or some kind of subscription platform.
Right.
I guess to start it off, like, why Patreon, and why, like, is it good for any artist, or what type of artist is Patreon a good platform? And maybe I always say, I've told you in the beginning, I think the audience is a smart audience, but maybe give like a quick little preview of what Patreon is, and then what type of artist is this something good for?
Yeah, so actually, I'd love to answer your question in almost like a broader lens, because when I started talking about Patreon and launching, because that's really what I talk about it in association with, it came from this idea where, again, going back to my clients, they were all wanting to introduce something new, something else. And when the pandemic happened, there were a lot of artists who were like, panic launching Patreons and like just like putting it out there.
I need money now.
Please help me. I lost all of my job and income. Please support me. And also there were a lot of my clients and other people in the industry who were like, okay, well, things have changed. We're all remote. Maybe I had a teaching studio that was in person. Now I have to pivot it to being remote. Maybe this is the time where I'm saying I actually want to go all in on this, which was amazing that happened. And so many people decided to like start a new venture, coaching or teaching or with Patreon or with something like that. So I was looking at that big picture, including Patreon and also including things like courses, coaching and whatnot, and noticed that, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of people were sort of like panic launching or panic posting and just putting it out there and being like, I have to do this and I need to get it out there and I need the money. And it was good because, you know, you want to take messy action and you don't want to hold too tightly onto stuff that you never put it out there. And especially during a pandemic, like we had to do what we had to do. Everyone had to. And at the same time, as it continued to go on, I noticed that there was such a lack of education in the music industry from people around launching. Whether you're launching an album, whether you're launching a Patreon, a new program, you're starting a multifaceted business, you're starting to teach, it was really hard for people to launch those things successfully. And so many people launched a Patreon and didn't get people to join, or they launched it and then they never talked about it again. And so it was just sitting there, dragging them down, not doing anything. So that's where I introduced my program Out to Launch and started teaching on the topic of launching. And that applies to Patreon launches and course launches, because it really is so important that when you're launching a Patreon or a course, that you're doing the due diligence and spending the time needed to be able to really do that. So when it comes to Patreon specifically, I think that they can be really useful for artists who are looking to add another stream of income to their work, who already have an established fan base and can now take like that fan base to like a VIP club basically, and who also are really strong with their brand pillars and can provide unique value other than just their music to their fans. And to their community. So it's really great in those ways. You do have to be committed to actually launching it and working on building up your audience before you launch it. And so that's where I come in.
So, sorry, cat might be showing up here and there. It's a little outdoor cat in our neighborhood, and he loves to come visit.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
For what are the common mistakes that people make when it comes to launching? Say that's one of the biggest areas where. Sorry, what's
allergic to the cat.
Maybe cat comes and starts sneezing. You've talked about like launching, being, I guess, one of the areas where people make the most mistakes. What are some common mistakes that people make when it comes to launching?
Yeah. So it's not going to be a surprise given what I just said. The biggest mistake really is rushing it, doing it too soon. And attached to that is not having their audience be ready for the launch. So the first thing is going to be like, warming your audience up is such a big part of the launch process, and a lot of people come up with their Patreon idea in 1 second. Mistake in sequential order of how this goes. Mistake number one that they hit is they come up with their idea in 1 second. They don't validate it. So they don't actually talk to their audience. They don't make sure that this is what their audience wants. They don't check in. They don't say, hey, would you pay this much for this perk? Hey, do you want this perk? Hey, is there something I'm missing that you'd really like to see? They just put it out there and assume it's exactly what their audience wants. And sometimes it isn't. So that's mistake number one. Then they go along the track and they come up with the idea, and then they just drop it out of thin air without ever having talked about it before, without warming their audience up to letting them know that it's coming, and without having any really pre-launch period where they're able to sort of like hype up the launch. Instead, they just drop it, they put it out there, and then they just leave it, and they expect that to do all of the work for them. 1 or 2 posts to do all the work for them, and that is simply not enough. When you are launching a Patreon, you want to make sure that, number one, you're creating something that your audience wants. Number two, you're warming your audience up and letting them know that this is coming. You don't want to just like throw something out there like a surprise release and expect your audience to eat it up, especially when you're asking them to purchase or opt into something. They need to know why this is for them, why it's relevant to them, and why they should give you your money. And they need time to go through that process. Plus to just get ready to buy from you in general. So we need that time. And then again, we need to also have like a designated launch period where you're spending more than a day or a couple days to just promote your post, or your post promoting your launch. You really need a longer period where you're having really targeted and intentional content out there and hyping people up with scarcity, of deadlines or bonuses or perks that run out and whatnot, so that people have incentive to join and they also can get all their questions answered.
Really good. So you're telling me if you build it, they will come doesn't exist in this? No, it doesn't magically appear. But
heck no.
I wish, right? I wish it was that easy. But you talk about knowing what your audience wants. So one of my favorite quotes is from Tony Robbins. That's don't fall in love with your product, fall in love with your audience, right? And if you really learn what it is your audience wants, like what kind of content they want you to share with them, that is the kind of content you would share. So how do you figure that out? Like, how do you figure out what kind of content do I put on my Patreon page? What does my audience want?
Like what perks you should basically include.
Yeah.
So I think that it really depends on your brand. Like, it's easy to create a pretty generic Patreon where it's just like, you get exclusive access and you get
merch discounts.
Yeah. And that, I'm not saying that stuff's bad, because it is good. Those are helpful perks. But we want to consider what's going to actually make you unique. And I say this a lot when it comes to building your audience and promoting yourself in general. But your music is not a good enough product, and it's not the product. You are the product. You are the whole package. People are wanting to follow you because they like your music and because they like who you are and what you stand for and what you put out there. So I would say the first step before you even think about launching something is making sure that you're actually clear as to what your brand pillars are in your brand overall. That's going to help really inform how we can make our Patreon perks even more unique. So let's say that you are someone who is a musician and you really love yoga, and maybe you're really into like the spiritual world and you like crystals, and you can like your music is maybe not all about that. It's not to say that everything you write about is like, I love my crystals. Like, that's not like, obviously you can write music about life things, but as part of your brand, that's kind of who you are, and maybe your music has like an airy feel, or it's kind of like indie and spacious, and so that's your brand. That also encompasses your interests and things that you would talk about. Maybe you do something where you have like a meditation every month that you provide for people, or you have like a new moon meetup or something like that. And so it's fun things that like are going to provide value in a way that's unique to you, not just as being the musician, but really considering your whole brand, and also therefore considering who your ideal audience is. Like, if you are that person who's spiritual and does new moon rituals, and I don't know, I could be totally losing your audience right now, but but I'm just trying to paint like a very visceral picture so you can see like what that would be like. Because if you're like a hard rocker and you don't care about any of that stuff, you're also going to see like, oh, this community isn't for me. But someone who does care about that stuff is gonna really clearly see this community is for me, and I love what she's doing, and the people in there are gonna get it and be just like me, and that's what you want. You want to be really tailoring it to your brand and, of course, your ideal fans or clients as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So it's funny because the mental health example, that's what we used on your podcast. Maybe
it's such an easy one.
It's such an easy one. I think it's something that we're both into, but it's also something that I'm actually really working on right now. I have an artist that I manage, and we're working on guided meditations. That is kind of her opt-in offer. And then once they're on Patreon, there'll be more meditations, and there'll be exclusive podcasts she does. So she's not a podcaster, but she wants to talk to other artists in her community about mental health within that genre. So she's in the hip hop genre, and if you feel like the mental health is not talked about enough in hip hop, because it's all about being tough and being cool and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she wants to do a mental health podcast with other hip hop artists that'll be only on the Patreon page. So excited to see how that goes. But mental health. I'm thinking about that a lot right now.
I think a lot of people are, and that's where it comes into like whether that's a pillar of yours or not. But let's say it is. People need support, and it's not to say that you're going to be someone's therapist via Patreon, but if you can provide like a community of people who understand what it's like to struggle, or who find healing through music, or who just like to have a place where they can be open about this, or maybe you do write about that in your music and you can give them early access to stuff or behind the scenes stuff, or a Q&A where people can just get closer to you and feel like heard, like that is really valuable for people, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And that's where it really matters, like not just what your music sounds like, but also what are you writing about, what are you saying in your music and beyond.
And an important thing you said is community, right? So besides this being an extra revenue stream, I mean, isn't Patreon a really good place to also build a community around your music?
Totally, yeah. And there's other ways to expand on it as well, like within Patreon, of course, you can have post your videos and whatnot. You can have a Discord attached to your Patreon, or use Slack as a perk, or a Facebook group as a perk, or any other thing that you maybe even create yourself that allows you to have a container. You can do live streams, of course, that are invite only, where maybe you get on a Zoom or do Q&As, or like I said, an example, maybe you do like a full moon meetup or something for VIP people, where you like are able to actually get on a screen with them once a month and talk with them and stuff like that. And that really helps to foster community deeper than you can on a platform like Instagram or just any other social media.
Mm-hmm. And then when someone builds the Patreon page, you can create multiple different levels. And if you're first starting out, you're a newer artist, I guess before I get to the levels, at what point do you know you have enough of an audience to start a Patreon page? Like, could you just start a Patreon page if you have a handful of fans, or do you suggest waiting till you're at a certain point?
That is a really good question. So I don't like to put numbers on things.
I call them guidelines.
What did you say?
I call them guidelines. They're not laws. They're just a guideline, like roundabout.
Yeah, but here's what I mean, though. Because, like, I think that you can have 1,000 followers on Instagram of people who are really engaged and be ready, and you could have 10,000 followers of people who are not engaged and not be ready. Yep. So it really just depends on where your audience is at. And I would like just take the pulse. Like my guidelines would be like, take the pulse on your audience and see where are they at. Like when you post on your stories and when you do polls or question boxes, do they answer? When you have calls to actions in your comments, do they answer? Are they saying intentional things? Or is it just like, OMG, you're so pretty? Like we want to really get to the bottom of like, where is our community at? Or is it like crickets and you feel like you're posting and you're talking to no one? If that's the case, then I recommend you start by building up your audience before you actually go to launch. If you feel like you also are kind of like, I want a certain income goal, this is something we want to consider. So again, first part's going to be like, how engaged is your audience? If they're not engaged, if they're not talking back to you, if they're not answering your questions, commenting on your posts, DMing you, we want to get them to that point, and then we can think about launching. And we can, of course, grow our following, but at the real core is like, get your current audience to a point where they're ready, because you want to warm them up and get them to the point where they can opt in. The second part, though, would be like, what is your intention and your goal? Because let's say that you want to make $500 from Patreon each month and your audience is still relatively small. And so you could launch and you could make $200 or even $300 a month, but you're just sort of like, honestly, I want to wait until my audience is bigger, until I can do a more fleshed out launch, and that's going to make it more worth it for me to show up each month on Patreon, then consider that as well. So like, can you launch and can you have 5 patrons sign up? Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, and maybe that's $100. Like, great. Right. Is it worth it to you though to run a full-fledged Patreon for $100 a month and put the time and energy into it? That's something that you have to decide. And there's absolutely no right or wrong answer. The answer might be, yeah, I love doing my Patreon. I'm going to start with $100. Sometimes that could be great too. Like I don't want this to be encouraging people to sit back and like wait until they hit some magical point. The point that I'm just trying to make is you want to make sure you're considering the amount of effort you're going to put into Patreon, and make sure you're putting that same amount of effort into warming up your audience for your launch and into your launch so that you can get the most out of it. Because you don't want to be putting a lot of effort into something that like 2 people joined and that you aren't really promoting, and then it's like, oh, I don't know how to keep up with it. It's such a waste. And what do I do with these people? And blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, totally. So last week we talked a lot about, last week with Isabella's episode, we talked a lot about like top of funnel, moving towards the middle of funnel stuff. And I'm considering Patreon towards the bottom of the funnel because they're actually paying for something, right? But everyone structures their business models differently. Some use the customer journey, which I use. Some people use the funnel method. Some people, it looks different for everyone. So when you say opt-in, is there an in-between from a third-party platform and a Patreon? Like, is that an email or some kind of list building thing? Or what is opt-in to you?
Okay, so when I think about the process, I do think that there would be like a middle ground. It's going to be different for everyone. So obviously everyone's going to have social media. I'm going to go real big picture with this because I have an audience builder bundle too. And like we talk about this, I've been talking about it a lot recently. So it's definitely on the brain. So if we're thinking like longer term, you start out, you have your social media platforms. I usually recommend starting with 1, potentially building up to 3, with an email list being platform 0. So everyone needs to have an email list, and then you're going to have maybe an Instagram, and then maybe build from there, maybe a TikTok, Clubhouse. Those are your top 3. You don't want to go too far beyond that. Certainly not to start, because then you're going to get overwhelmed. You're not going to be able to build. So again, you want to pick your 1 to 3 platforms that you're really intentionally going to focus on and post on regularly and build a community on. Then you can grow from there, but we're going to focus on those first. So the email list opt-in is something that you should have. It's sort of like beyond launching, just like in general, I recommend that you have it. And so that's something I would set up, and I'm sure something you talked about with Isabella. We talked about it on when you came on my podcast too, so you should definitely check those out. But again, yes, I agree. It's definitely something you should set up. And then when you get to the launching process, and actually let me add first that on these platforms, on your email list, on your Instagram, whatever, you're spending this time nurturing your audience before you launch and right before you launch and when you're launching, you're nurturing your audience. So in the meantime, as you prep for all the launch stuff or you think about it, you should be providing value consistently to your audience, emailing them regularly, posting regularly, etc. When you get to the stage where you're getting ready to launch, there's a couple things that you can do. I call it a pre-launch event, which is something that's basically going to like hype up that launch. And this is actually going to be an opt-in in and of itself. Now, you can also do a freebie before that pre-launch event. Basically, like you would have a freebie for your email list normally, you could do or introduce a new freebie that's like specifically related to what's coming. This is going to be more relevant if you're launching a course, because if you're launching a Patreon, your opt-in is most likely relevant to what's going to be in the Patreon, but I'll just throw that out there. Then when you're approaching the launch, you're going to have a launch event. So maybe you have like webinar, free challenge, masterclass, free concert, like virtual concert or something like that. Or like even just like a party. Like one time over in 2020, when I was launching one of my courses, I did like a quarantine party as my pre-launch event. And so I did a little bit of like a training because it was right when the pandemic hit. And then we went into the offer, which was like about wellness and everything at that time. So it worked out well. But you are basically going to host something, and you can host something to kick off the event. And as part of that, they're going to opt in to your email list to get connected, to RSVP, save their spot, get the information and whatnot. So that serves as a both and, because it's an opt-in and it's also a way for them to be able to get more value from you before you launch. And then on that event, you're going to essentially pitch your event. This is something you see a lot of coaches and online marketers do, classic webinar. I don't want you to think like as an artist, you have to have like a super gross webinar. This gets to be something that's fun and most importantly is valuable for your audience and just allows you to have like a celebration and like a launch party basically to really introduce your offer to your warmest audience, because the people who opt into that are going to be your warmest audience.
So when you have an artist that is mostly known for just their music, right? So let's say it's someone that has done a really good job building up their YouTube, or maybe done a good job building up their Spotify. They have say anywhere from 25,000 to 100,000 monthly streams, but they haven't really done a good job of sharing the other brand pillars we talk about, like other areas of their personality. What would you suggest an artist like that to offer on their Patreon? And I guess we can kind of reverse engineer it from there, because the way I like doing it is to start what the offer on a Patreon is, and then figure out what your opt-in is from there. I don't know if you use that same kind of process to figure out what the opt-in is, but I start with the Patreon page, because I feel like the opt-in should be relevant to what the Patreon is, right? Because they're opting into something that they want to have more of. So if it's someone that's just been focused on music and hasn't really developed their brand, but they have a following, should they now build like their brand pillars and figure out what else they can post about to create a Patreon around, or do they still just dive deeper into the music? You're shaking your head, yes.
Brand pillars,
yes. Brand pillar party.
Brand pillar party, yeah, because yes. And if you're like, I don't know, why do people like your music? Why do people like your videos? If you build up a following on YouTube, whether you're doing covers or originals or whatever, why do people stay? Why are they intrigued? Is it your voice, your presence, your humor, your video quality, your song choice, your genre? Like, there's a reason. And even if it might not be they stay because they know my deep story with mental health, like they stay for a reason. So start there, and then also go into your brand pillars, because now it's time to expand. At this point, again, like when we're thinking Patreon, when we're thinking community, people are going to pay to be closer to you. Well, what's going to make them want to get closer to you? Sometimes it's kind of having to do with that sort of like celebrity or influencer, I don't know, vibe. I'll just use that word. Like, if you maybe are someone who puts out like really high quality YouTube videos and people maybe just want advanced access to it, or they want to be in your fan club of people who also watch your videos, or they want the extra covers that you do or something like that. Like, that can often be enough, or at least a starting point. And depending on what your brand is, it might also be that you need to have like more of a community or a little bit more vulnerability, or people relate to you because they've struggled with something that you've struggled with, right? So like it just depends. I use Taylor Swift as an example all the time because people like to think, I feel like it's easy to look at Taylor Swift right now and just be like, she just has this huge fan base and she can just drop things and her fans are just like Easter egg hunting all over the place trying to figure out what she's doing. And you forget the journey of how she got there, because right now she doesn't post super frequently on social media. When she does, it seems like she is dropping a hint of people to figure out what's coming next, right? Like, it's not like she's showing up on her stories every day being like, hey guys, this is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. It's really intentional what she's doing and a little bit more sparse, and she's able to be a lot more private. Mm-hmm. But she's able to be that way because she spent years on Tumblr, on Twitter, communicating with her fans, talking with them, sharing things, sharing in her music the stories of what she went through, which her fans related with, sharing her experiences through her music. Those are going to be part of her brand pillars. And she created a community with her fans during her meet and greets. Okay, community. On Tumblr, okay, community. Like, she was there. She was present. She didn't just pop out singles and disappear. Even if you think of like, Nas X, like he is like on TikTok a lot now, and you sort of, with the release of his latest song, like you saw him, like I would see videos of, I don't even follow him, but I would see videos of him pop up or responding to people, and like a trend of his like song went viral, and it's stuff like that where like you're creating a community because he's singing about a specific topic, you know, like he's owning the fact that like he's gay, and he writes about that in his music, and that's what people are resonating with, or not resonating with, but like, especially in his case, like he had a lot of haters, but that sort of just fueled his community even more so. So I'm just sharing these examples so that you can start to see that even if you're thinking of big artists that you're like, but how did they achieve this? And I don't see why I have to do it. They started somewhere, and you need to start somewhere too, and you need to get specific.
Yep, they all start somewhere. Katie, are you a Swiftie?
Kind of.
Okay, my wife is a big time Swiftie, and every time Taylor Swift comes to Florida, trust me, we are going.
That's so funny. This is like the truth. Like, I'm not like a diehard Swift. Like, I really appreciate and value Taylor Swift. And when I was younger, when I was in high school, I really loved her. And I sort of fell off the wagon. Like, I didn't even really listen to her last two albums. Like, I listened to them like once or twice. Like, don't come at me, it's fine. But I've seen her so many times for some reason, because friends of mine, like, I saw her in JFK Terminal 5 when I was in high school, and she was just starting out. Like, crazy, because like my uncle was a airline pilot, and then I just like somehow got the hookup to all of this Taylor Swift stuff. So I really should be a bigger Swiftie than I am. And I do love her. I think she's amazing and incredibly talented. But yeah, I'll have to get back on the train. I am on Taylor Swift TikTok though, and so I always get the videos like, here's what she means in this Instagram post, which I think is hilarious.
I love it. No, she's definitely one of my top 10 concerts, and it's
she puts on a great concert. She
does. And the only reason I won't say top 5 is because the industry I'm in, I mean, having been a promoter, I've gone, it's insane when I say that number, but when, you know, just think 150 to 200 shows a year for 16 years. I mean, I've seen over 2,500 shows, which is insane. Yeah. So I have a large list to choose from, but if I was only going to 1 or 2 shows a year, like the average person, then yeah, probably my top 5 or even top 3 concerts I've ever been to.
What's your number one?
My number one's got to be my first one, because I think that's what really sparked it all. So I grew up in Germany, and my favorite band was Guns N' Roses. And in 1992, when Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 dropped, I saw them at the Frankfurt Soccer Stadium in Germany, and it was really, really hard to top that first experience. But as an adult, my favorite is Foo Fighters at the House of Blues in New Orleans. So they were doing, I've told the story a few times on the podcast, but they, for their Sonic Highways album, they recorded a song in a musically influential city in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with the album, but so they recorded 10 songs in 10 different cities. And then when they were releasing the album, before they, I guess the launch campaign to the album, which you'll probably love, is they were doing a documentary on HBO every week. So it was a 10-week show on HBO
Wow.
where every week they had a documentary in that city. So it's recording that song in that city, the music history about that city, which was really cool. And then they did a secret show in that city the night of that city's episode. So the night of New Orleans, they played, the secret show at our House of Blues. Well, I've seen them before that at festivals and arenas and stadiums, and now to take that energy and put it into an 800-person club, it was absolutely insane. And that's my favorite show.
That sounds amazing.
What's your favorite show that you've been to?
Well, I think it would probably be Paul McCartney, Irving Plaza, Valentine's Day. So like,
Nice.
this was years ago. Like, I want to say it was like 2016 or 2015, I think. And Paul McCartney, it was whatever year was the 40th anniversary of SNL, because it was the day before that. And
Okay.
Paul McCartney was just like, I'm going to just do a concert in Irving Plaza.
That's so
and
cool.
I literally was getting brunch with my friends a block away from Irving Plaza. You had to go to Irving Plaza and get the tickets, obviously a limited number. And I did it, and I went, and it was like, he didn't go on until like midnight, which was very late for me because I mean, I don't stay up that late, but it was like you rallied, and then there was like a ton of celebrities at the top, and it was very like not production based, like Taylor Swift, because that is an amazing
Massive
show.
production.
Yeah, but as far as like what I actually just like life goals, I was like, yes, I will never forget this.
It's so awesome. It's so cool when you see an artist that could play a venue that's maybe even 10 times bigger, right? Than, I mean, he definitely plays, I think Urban Plaza like 1,500, 200.
I saw him at like Yankee Stadium when I was a lot younger. So yeah, it's like he's playing like the biggest places you could get. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, pile in, wait an hour and a half for him to come on. He'll show up when he shows up. And there it is. It was crazy.
That's so cool. It's such a fun experience.
Yeah.
So getting back on track.
Sorry.
All good. I love tangents. That's my job to get us back on track. We're talking about opt-ins. What are some of your favorite opt-ins that you have seen that maybe artists could use as an example?
Yeah. So
Beyond a free download.
Yeah. Because I actually am not a huge fan of free downloads, but know your audience, because maybe they will be. I think that there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. PDFs of tips that you have on certain topics, maybe like exclusive videos from the Vault songs. If there's something specific that you teach on or can share, even that's like lifestyle stuff, like maybe I'm gonna try to come up with an example on the spot, but like maybe you are very wellness oriented, and like just, as a musician, maybe you've got the vibe going, you write about love and gratitude and all that stuff, and you also like live a very non-toxic lifestyle, and that's just like a part of your brand. Well, maybe you have like a PDF freebie of like your top recommendations for like how to go non-toxic, and like, you can include promo links and stuff like that, discounts or something like that, where it's, again, related to your brand and just like who you are, and something that people are going to find valuable, and a reason why they're going to follow you and keep up with you, because they also like resonate with that and want to learn about that. Something else you could do too is just basically have an opt-in that's a promise. So maybe on your email list, or as a part of your email list, you email out your YouTube videos to everyone the day before they go live to the public. So for the opt-in, it's not necessarily like, here's the PDF or here's the video, but instead it's join to get advanced access of this stuff, right? So small things, but like something like that can really encourage people to join, to get that exclusive access or the advanced access. You could do a Facebook group, and when people sign up for that, they get, put on your email list. So things like that. Collaborations, maybe like a collaboration video that you do with someone that you both use as opt-ins for your email list. Only you can see if you sign up, stuff like that.
I like that. And if you can't really think of anything right when you're first starting out, I mean, just that first access, right? Early access to stuff, I mean, that stuff can help as well. Or maybe even VIP experiences at your shows in the beginning. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you can try to think of, like think beyond just the free download. And gave the example of, I hope she's okay with me sharing. I'm not naming the artist's name, but the one I'm working on with, right? So it's we kind of talked about earlier about like when an artist is strictly just about the music, like do they open up more about their brand pillars? And that's what we're doing now. We're cracking her open a little bit to share more stuff publicly that's authentic to her. Like on Facebook, she talks about mental health all the time, but not so much on Instagram, Twitter. So I was like, let's bring someone on Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah.
And for her launch, for her like launch opt-in, we're doing a guided meditation that you're going to get from her, with her voice and her maybe even singing a little bit in the background, like humming some harmonies, and also a hip hop workshop, because you're really big into hip hop culture in general and like how to construct a hip hop song. It's like a little 20-30 minute workshop videos, and that's gonna be our opt-in. We're gonna test that out and see if that works.
That. Yeah. I think that really works too if you're also like, if you know you have an audience of people who are really into the music, or who are audiophiles, or who are also producers, or really value like the how you made it. Again, know your audience. Like, if you are someone, I'm thinking of this because my dad is like, he's such an audiophile, so he really he actually started his own like little record company, which is so cool.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, but like he really values like it. He's gonna sell like high quality albums, like albums that are basically made for audiophiles. So like if you're an artist and you create your vinyls, or you record in a certain way that like really puts a focus on that, or then know that like maybe that's what your audience wants. They want like a behind the scenes of how you recorded it, or like something like that, and that's where that stuff is really, really valuable.
And any artists are listening to this, or any aspiring managers, like from here on forward, if you haven't done this, start documenting everything, because you never know when you might use that, because you're gonna be so happy once you have your opt-in offer, right? Because now that's going to give you more ideas, more things you can add in your library. And then once they're opted in, and I guess a quick little educational tip for people, if you're searching these things online, other words for opt-in, I mean, Katie mentioned freebie earlier. That's another word you might see being used. Lead magnet, free offer, right? So those are other terms you might see around on the internet. But once you're opted in, you are now on the email list. Hopefully now we're going to try to sell you to be on the Patreon. So what does that look like? Once they're opted in, do you put them through a welcome sequence? Do they get a few different emails, and then the call to actions at the last email? And how many emails do you send them? Like, what does that process look like for you?
So it depends. I think that I definitely recommend a welcome sequence, hands down. 2 to 3 emails, introducing yourself, the community, etc. If you have any other free places like a Facebook group, or go follow me on TikTok, or anywhere else that you want them to be, like make those calls to actions in the welcome sequences. When it comes to like, automatic promoting and stuff like that, sequences to get people to Patreon, I don't do that all the time. Usually I don't. And here's why. I mostly focus on live launches and teaching live launching currently. And if you are at the point in your career where you've already launched your Patreon several times, and obviously Patreon is kind of open all the time. Right. But when I say launch, I mean you're going to be hard promoting it for a week to 2 weeks. And that's probably when you're going to get the most people to join as well. Now you can soft promote in the in-between of that, and you should soft promote in the in-between of that, and you can soft promote in your emails as well. But if you haven't, obviously if you haven't launched the first time, you're not going to sell them. I wouldn't recommend just doing a sequence to like welcome them into the Patreon if you haven't launched yet. I would start with a launch to your whole email list. And if you're still working on building that up, I'm not anti call to action or anti funnel sequence. I do just think though you want to make sure your audience is appropriately warmed up before you pitch them, or you could be missing opportunities. And sometimes people need to be with you for a little while longer before they're ready to buy in. So I would focus on live launching a couple times, getting your community really, really solid, making sure that you know exactly what your ideal client and fan wants, needs, says, resonates with. And then once you have that information and data, and once you are kind of moving away maybe from the live launches and more to the passive launches, then you can introduce a sequence. Again, this is not saying that if you send emails out and you're referencing your Patreon or you're referencing a live stream that's happening, that you shouldn't promote it. You should. Link it up, tell people they can join. But to have a welcome sequence or a promotional sequence that's like 7 emails long, and in that 7 emails you're going to convert them, that can be a little bit tricky if you're not like 100% sure who your ideal client is, what they need to hear, and what's going to get them to convert.
Very, very true. So the hard launches. So once the Patreon's launched, I mean, it's kind of always there, right? And I always try to emphasize, make sure people can find it everywhere. They can find it through your social media links. They can find it through your website. So it sounds like you would use the welcome sequence more like in the in-between launches. Am I getting that right?
Well, I don't see. Okay, so I don't see them.
So let's say, sorry. So let's say the Patreon's launched. You've done your hard launch. Now it's just there.
Yeah.
And someone sees a music video, goes to your webpage, and now signs up for an email list.
Yeah.
What happens to those subscribers?
So they would get the welcome sequence, and then they would get all of your regular emails. So this is where, again, like at some point, yes, I recommend introducing an email sequence where you could passively sell it to them. But I don't think that that's right for everyone to start out with. So let's say that you're not there yet. Let's say you've launched your Patreon once, you're still building it up. What you do is like you'd have the welcome sequence, you know, if you want to have any other sequences or just emails as well. And you certainly could mention your Patreon and invite them to join. But what I would focus more on is just emailing them regularly and soft promoting it regularly. So what I mean by that is like, let's say you have an email where you're talking about like, I don't know, 5 things that you learned this week while recording your last video. And you're just like sharing your experience on that. You can say the video is going to drop early in my Patreon tomorrow. So click here if you want to join and get early access to it. So you're still like directing them to it and you're still able to promote it in between the like hard launch periods, but you're not, having to make the sale in a really like short period of time. And then if they don't make it, then they go to like didn't buy sequence and then blah, blah, because you just want to make sure that your audience is appropriately nurtured and taken care of and that you're giving them a lot of value before they opt in. And again, that like to craft, my point here is just to craft like an email sequence that really converts and works. You have to know exactly what you're going to say and exactly what's going to resonate. And so that's why I say just get a little bit more data first and really like figure out what's working. Make sure that your Patreon is running in a way that works for you. Make sure you feel really good about the deliverables and do all of that and get all of that figured out before you introduce a sequence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And if you're doing multiple, let's say you've launched and you're doing a couple of like other launches throughout the year where you're like actively promoting it, what would you plan those around? Would you plan those around like album releases, single releases?
You could do that or you could not do that. So like it really is just like whatever you want. So I have some people, if you haven't launched a Patreon at all, you're going to do the first launch basically as like a here's my Patreon launch. Very exciting introduction. If you've launched a Patreon before, you can still do a relaunch of it, whether you want to sort of like move things around and adjust things with your Patreon or whether you just want to relaunch exactly what you have, you still can relaunch it. And if you've launched the first time, again, you can always just do a second launch to promote it with some extra perks, like maybe like a discount or a bonus that's active when people join during a specific time, because that's going to incentivize them to join during a specific time. You can have a standalone Patreon launch that's not tied to an album or single or anything like that. However, you also can do one that is attached to an album, single, or something like that. And I like to use it in a way where you are essentially, if it's a single, what I would do is launch it around the time that the single is going to be released. Now, you're going to want to have a pretty big warm-up time where you're warming your audience up to the fact that both the single and the Patreon is coming so that they know. But then you can launch the Patreon before the single release so that people can join the Patreon and get the exclusive advanced access to the big single perks and stuff like that before it goes to the public, and then release the single to the public. So the incentive there is that they're going to get access to the single and maybe some bonus merch or videos or stuff like that related to the single before anyone else hears it. If you're doing an album, then I would likely, I would probably launch the Patreon way before the album comes out, but sort of like a crowdfunding thing where like you're launching it like, I'm about to embark on the journey to record and create the album, so sign up now, and I'm launching it now so that you can get in for that whole process, and maybe you get these extra perks, or you get this extra bonus right for signing up during this time. I don't know I would launch a Patreon specifically with an album release, just because that an album release is such a hefty thing that involves like single promos and the album promo, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and so adding a Patreon could get a little overwhelming for your audience and for you to manage during that time. But that's what I'd recommend if you're thinking about how to navigate with the other things that you have planned and the other things that you're thinking about doing.
I like that. I like sharing it, like launching a Patreon first, and then maybe even before you go into the studio, so you can share that entire process, that entire journey, because that would be kind of cool to see. Later on. For people like Gary Vee and Amy Porterfield, they talk a lot about sharing, and what I love about like guests like you, right? It's we're sharing a lot of really like useful stuff that people are using, and it's like you want to share your best stuff. That's what they preach. Like put your best stuff out there to the public, and then then it's like, why sign up for the course if you're putting your best stuff out there? And it's because once you sign up for the course, it's laid out nicely. There's deeper stories, lots of examples, gives you more ideas of what to do, right? But if you're an artist, like how do you figure out what you share free on your social media platforms when you have to create a zillion pieces of content a day, according to Gary Vee, versus like what do you keep exclusive just for the Patreon? Like how do you find that balance?
That is a really great question. And there's no like exact formula. You kind of have to figure out what the line is. But I think that essentially the way I like to think of it is that in your Patreon, and this is why I said you can do the basic Patreon perks where it's like exclusive access and blah, blah, blah. But like what you really want to deliver to people is something that they can't get other places. So if you are doing a live stream in your Patreon, don't be going live every week on Instagram because it's going to devalue your Patreon perks. You know, if you're doing like a monthly meetup, that's something that they can't get everywhere else. If they're doing a Slack or a Discord, they can't get that anywhere else. So there's going to be a distinct difference there, and a pretty clear-cut thing where it's like, if you want to take this to the next level, you have to go to Patreon. So for every perk that you have, think about what is the next level. Like if you're doing exclusive access to videos, well, if they're getting advanced access a week before, then that's enough. You can still share the video on social media, but your Patreons get it a week before. If you're doing exclusive content, then you just have to figure out what is the exclusive content, what makes it exclusive, and how can I make sure I have enough to share for people to be intrigued on my social media and then want more, right? So I don't think things like behind the scenes photos, unless you have like a full-blown digital photo album or something and you're sharing a couple on social media and like hundreds on Patreon, like see the difference. But if you're being like, oh, here's one photo, the exclusive content you're getting on Patreon, is that really going to be enough for people? And is that going to leave you high and dry with social media content? So those are the things that you want to consider. You should be providing a ton of value on social media. Videos, posts, Instagram stories is something I love to use a lot because you can really talk to your audience and engage with them. And so those things you don't want to be skimpy. You want to really go all in with that, and you want to make sure you're really filling out your content there. So it's not about creating Patreon and then cutting down your free content because now you have a Patreon. It's about really going above and beyond in both area and making your Patreon content so exclusive and enticing that they can't get it anywhere else. So it's not really imposing on your social media content. It's really just enhancing it.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned Discord and Slack a few times. If you're starting a Patreon, right, the artist would assume the purpose of starting the Patreon is to have my community there on the Patreon page. Why still start a Discord or Slack channel? Like what's different from those versus your Patreon page?
So I think there's only so much you can really do on a Patreon page itself. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a Discord or a Slack channel, you can have different threads, conversations going at all times, the ability for you to talk more. So while you can deliver posts and videos and whatnot within the Patreon platform for people, if you really want to facilitate larger and longer form conversations, I think that Discord or Slack is a way for that to happen. It's also a way for that to happen without you having to be there. So like you can have a Discord channel that like is facilitated by you, and yes, maybe you pop in, but maybe your community is just there every day talking to each other. Yeah. About your music, about things that they all like, and you don't always have to be there to do it, and that's not something you can do right within Patreon. So it allows like you to get closer with your community, but also your community to get closer with each other.
Yep. And then, I think we've talked about this on your podcast the one that came out last week, but it was the conversation a little longer ago.
Yeah.
Where, we talked about like another purpose of having the Patreon page is to build community. So how fun is it when, I don't know, let's say Katie and I live in the same city and we're both big time Swifties, since we used to like, how cool would it be if we're like, whoa, like Taylor Swift, we met on her Patreon channel and she's coming to play in the city in between the two of us. Let's go meet up. Let's go have lunch. Let's go to the show together. Let's just like party and go all out. Like that's what you can just create on a smaller scale. Like,
yep.
Yes, it'll happen for a Taylor Swift show, but if you're building a community and let's say you have 500 or 1,000 subscribers on Patreon, and now they meet each other through your Discord channel, like you're really building now an experience for your fans because now they want to see each other at the shows too.
Totally. Yeah. And the biggest advice I can give, the biggest tip I can give is that when you are creating and launching a Patreon, I want you to not think about you. I want you to think about your audience. And a lot of people come at it from a place of like, I'm launching my Patreon. Please support me. Please support my music. Please basically pay me so that I can sustain to do this. And I'm not taking that intention away from launching a Patreon. Like, of course, you're going to introduce a Patreon so you can make more money. And there's absolutely no shame in that. However, if you're only launching, promoting, and coming from that place, why is your audience going to join? It's ultimately big picture, and in order to make sales, it's not about you, it's about them, and it's about the experience you're creating for them. And so not only do you need to actually facilitate that, but when you're promoting it, you also need to be really clear on how that is happening and letting people know that that's happening so that they know, oh, it's not, hey guys, could you please sign up my Patreon so that I can like afford to eat this month and like I'm so desperate and I just want to do music, please. It's, hey, I created this community for my super fans of people who want like-minded people that they can talk to every day in the Slack channel about these topics and listen to advanced access of the music so that you always are on top of things and get blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So what is the value to them? What's going to actually make them join? And what's not going to... I mean, first of all, I think it's a turnoff when people are being desperate about it. But like, because people don't always want to support that. Just being frank, but also just going to be more enticing for people if they can support you and they can really clearly see what they get out of it.
Exactly. Yep. Fall in love with your customer, not your product, right? So with a Discord channel, I think it's also another great way to kind of organize your Patreon, because I feel like Patreon is just like one stream. Yes, you can add like buttons on the top now, but I feel like you could almost utilize the Discord channel saying, okay, this is where you find this on my Patreon page. This is where you find that on my Patreon page. Kind of just create some organization around it as well. And that's why I love having that along with the Patreon page. Do you have any favorite artists that have a Patreon page or favorite way like people are using Patreon? So one thing I encourage people as well, if you're going to launch a Patreon, you're looking for inspiration, try to look at least 25 to 50 different channels of people that are similar to you and different to see what they're offering. And I can throw in a couple of my favorite samples in the show notes for this episode. But do you have any favorites on Patreon, how they're utilizing the platform?
Yeah, I mean, I'll shout out a couple of my clients. Like one of my clients, she writes a lot of music about like healing from trauma, from grief and things like that. And so she's created a community on Patreon where they talk about that, and she's able to connect with her fans via live streams. And like, I think we decided to call it basically like sound check, like meet and greets, like before her live stream. So her VIP people can come before she goes live, just like you would with like a meet and greet or like a sound check Q&A kind of thing. And that's been really amazing to see her be able to grow her community deeper through that. I have a client who's in my program Out to Launch right now, who is launching a Patreon or relaunching her Patreon. And she is basically like Fred Rogers meets opera community. And she has she's creating a web series called The Broke Soprano. And basically she's going to be introducing not just behind the scenes of like her music and stuff like that, but also it's a way for you to actually get access to The Broke Soprano. The Broke Sopranos Neighborhood, which is the name of like the web series. So you can watch that, and you can be a part of the Discord community where you have people, especially for opera, that's a community where people are, listen, it's like, not as poppin' these
Yes,
days, but there's actually a lot of people
Absolutely.
out there who love opera and are like, I don't know, my friends don't like it, but I know there's people out there that I want to connect with. So she's able to create a community of people who are going to get it. I think she'll be launching it around the time this episode goes live, so you can definitely go check her out. It's the Baroque soprano, but I thought that was really cool because
Baroque
again, it's
soprano.
yeah, like Baroque period.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool because again, like you're able to create both of them. I think are able to create really specific communities for really specific people, get in touch with their people, and also just provide a space that goes beyond them. Like it's not all just about them. It's really about their mission and their community, which I love.
Who's the other artist? I'll make sure I give them some love in the show notes.
The other one was Megan Pullles. I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Megan with an H and then Pulles.
Okay. Yeah, please send me that, and I'll add that in the show
I
notes as well.
will.
And then, how are you doing on time? We're coming up on an hour. Are you having a hard out, or you have?
No, I can stay on for a little bit longer.
Okay, so let me shift real quick to the courses thing, because you did mention courses, and maybe we'll dive deeper into that in round 3 when your next project launches. But for the courses, how do you know if you're an artist if you should do a course or a Patreon page?
I think it fully depends on what you want to do. While you can have a Patreon page that teaches things, like there are a lot of voice teachers out there who have Patreons, or guitar teachers, like you can totally do it that way. If you are coming from a perspective of education, you're probably going to want to do a course. If you're coming from a perspective of like community and just like deliverables and the process of your music, then I would do a Patreon.
I like that.
So I think a course would come into play for someone who's like, oh, I like intentionally want to teach on how to grow your audience, how to build a YouTube, how to get well, how to rebalance your hormones, like stuff like that is where I would do a program or a coaching program or a course. Like it could be one-on-one, it could be group coaching as well, but that's the distinct difference. Like you wouldn't do a course around your music. You would do a Patreon most likely around that.
Yeah.
But if you are going to venture into like the teaching or the coaching area of things and you want to specifically share something that you've learned that you can teach others how to do, that's where I would do a course.
Okay. And then I know one of the most popular platforms that people are using for the whole course thing is Kajabi. That's where I see most of the courses that I'm even part of being built on. And Kajabi at the low level is like about $100 a month. Now, of course, when you're launching, you want to launch with already having an audience, right? So you're kind of in a way taking a risk. But could you do a soft launch on Patreon and host your course there, since you're really just paying a commission versus Kajabi? Or are there other platforms that if someone doesn't want to spend $100 a month right out of the gate?
Yeah. So I am not too keen on the idea of launching on Patreon, but there are other platforms like Thinkific and Teachable that I do think take a lower cut or just are less expensive than Kajabi. I personally love Kajabi. That's where I host my stuff. So it really is a great platform. The other thing that you could do though is start with like private coaching or group coaching and get, number one, that's going to be a higher ticket and therefore more money coming in. And also it will allow you to really test out your systems and your curriculum before you turn it into a course. So not only can that provide you with some of the like funding to actually be able to maybe pay for a Kajabi platform or any platform to host your course when you do introduce it, but it's also a great way to be able to, like I said, test out your material and really fine tune your process that you're going to teach and the order you're going to teach it in and resources and all of this stuff before you go to launch your actual course. So it's kind of a win-win in that sense. I usually recommend new coaches to start with one-on-one coaching, because even if it's for a short period of time, the experience that you get working one-on-one with someone allows you to just, for them to gain a lot more clarity, but also for you to gain clarity as a coach for like, and really like step into your teaching methods that you shine in. So that's like kind of a little hack maybe, but just thinking courses, yes, there are other platforms. You can do a Kajabi free trial. You can think about Thinkific or Teachable and host your courses in that way.
Mm-hmm. And then for artists, right? So sounds like you're targeting mostly artists with your courses. And there's a lot of great courses out there for artists. And let's be real, artists don't have a lot of money. When they're first starting out their careers, which is like almost a catch-22 when they're paying for like $1,000 course or $500 course, whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you decide, one, as a coach, and even like for maybe an artist that might start a coach or become a coach, if you are charging like a monthly subscription model like you would on Patreon versus like just buying the entire course for $500, $700, whatever some of these courses out there are?
Like a Patreon versus a course, basically.
So on Kajabi, I have two courses that I'm in, and they allow you to pay monthly. So it's like $17 a month, $37 a month versus paying just for the bulk course. How do you determine if a subscription model is better for you versus like just buying the course in bulk?
Right. Okay. So from a creator's perspective, it's really just about like deciding on what kind of offer you want to have, because I would actually classify that offer as a membership offer, or as like a course payment plan offer. Though if it never runs out, it's not really a payment plan. It's really just a membership where it's like you get access for X amount of months. There's pros and cons to each, and it really just depends on like what you want and what you prefer. Market researching your audience is going to be really helpful to determine this, and also figuring out again, like, what do you want to say? How do you want to say it? Who do you want to say it to? And how is that information best going to be delivered? If it's best delivered as a course, just buy it, take it, leave me alone, do it, self-paced, that kind of thing, then great. If it's something where maybe you drip it out, or they get access to you, or maybe they even have calls with you, great. But like, all of those things require a different time and energy boundary and deliverable from your perspective. And so that's also going to be considered when you think about the price. Now, even whether it's a payment plan or a subscription, obviously if you're doing something month to month and you're breaking up the price, you have the ability to make it more affordable for people because they can like pay less at a time. But you also do run the risk as a creator of people bouncing or not paying or changing their cars or whatever. And so you have to deal with that as well, which can be fine, but it can also add for a little bit more admin work on your behalf, or frustration if you don't want to deal with people not paying and then you have to reach out to them and have the money conversation, like that kind of stuff that can be basically things that you just have to navigate as a course creator or as a musician. So I know I'm spitting a lot of things out there, but all this to say there's a lot really to consider. So it's not a simple answer. It's really just look at the whole picture of what is it that you're delivering. How do you want to deliver it in the best way that's going to serve your clients or your fans? And what payment options can we offer to make your life easy and their life easy? And I also just want to add one thing that is like, yes, there is the belief and the stereotype and truth to the fact that like some musicians don't have a lot of money to start with, and it's kind of like a catch-22 because how are you going to invest in your career or record music if you have no money, but you need to do those things to make money? And I totally understand that. I, though, also think like, figure it out. As a musician, figure it out. I'm kind of like no nonsense. Like, I have a $50 product called the Wealthy Musician Bundle that literally teaches you the basic foundations you need to get your money shit in order. And so like, I don't want to make myself sound like a total hard ass because like, trust me, I have a lot of compassion.
You're so tough, Katie.
But I also think like, I'm not in the business of like begging people to like join my course, because if they're not ready or they're not willing to spend the money, then they're not going to be. But I know that when it's a priority for someone, they will make it a priority, which means that as a musician, for you too, like, you need to just decide what are your priorities. Do you want to make money faster, or do you want to kind of struggle and figure it out on your own? Do you value investing in this? Do you not? And like, you'll make mistakes, you'll do some things right, you'll do some things wrong, but like, in my opinion, investing in your music career is one of the best things that you can do, and investing in yourself is one of the best things you can do to grow your music career. That's going to look different every step of the way. Like, the course you need to take, or the merch you need to buy, or the instruments or whatever, like, that's all going to look different depending on where you're at in your career. So, but a mentor or a coach, like, that shit is so valuable. So absolutely. I think it's just really important to be honest about like, what are you willing to prioritize and what's a priority, and what are you going to do to make that happen? Because maybe it is starting with like the $50 wealthy musician thing and like getting your finances in order, or taking a finance course so that you can handle that, or doing the side hustle, or staying in your job and saving this money so that you then can invest. But like, I have so many people who have been like, you know, I'm trying, I'm doing this, I'm waiting until I get this money. And it's like, well, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, are you really, like, or are you not? And it's not up to any of us to be able to dictate how people act or spend their money. It's only up to you. Like, it's only up to you. You just have to decide, like, how you want this to go and how you want to live this life. And money is abundant. Like, if you let it come to you and you really step into that and you work on your money beliefs and you work on your bank account, like, that will come. But you have to put in the work at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree with all those things. And if there's a course that you really want to take and you're trying to figure out how can you afford it, I mean, break it down on what it costs per day. So let's say, so you have I think the one with you and Bree has the option where you'd have a payment plan. So if there's a payment plan versus like a one-time fee, figure out what it costs per day for the month, right? So it's $150. I don't know what it is, but say it's $150 a month. How much do you need to save per day? And that's about $5 a day that you need to save, right? Maybe my math is really bad right now. No, I think it's $5 a day. But $5 a day. So, you know, if you go to Starbucks every day, or you go out to lunch every day, maybe skip your Starbucks for a month, skip your lunch for a month, right? So just do the math, reverse engineer it. And if it's $450 in one shot, then maybe for the next 90 days, you make a $5 a day sacrifice to save that money up, but don't spend it. Don't be like, oh, I have this $300 sitting here now, I can go party. And like, no, you're saving it for this course. And there's so much value to always educating yourself. Because, you know, even me, like, I've been in this business for 16 years now, and like, there's just so much information out there constantly. And for years, I was touring because that's what the industry was. And I've completely changed my mind, having been on the road, seeing what the lifestyle on the road. And I'm more pro building an online business first, and then using touring to supplement, but not having a tour 200 shows a year, being able to do it with 50 shows a year. So look into some courses. I'm in 3 courses right now. I'm always pushing myself, challenging myself. What are some of your favorite courses besides yours, of course, that you've taken?
Okay. So let's see. When years ago, I did several money courses. The Wealth Accelerator, by Deeper Than Money, or Chloe Lease, is a great program for people who are like in a money crisis, which I wasn't in a money crisis when I took it. I was just obsessed with learning about money. So I don't know why I said it like that, but like, no, but it's really great for people who want to pay off debt, who want to learn how to manage their money better. And I actually worked one-on-one with Chloe. So like, it was really cool because she, you know, helped me figure out managing money for my business, stuff like that. But she also has some other courses too. She's great. I highly recommend her stuff. I'm trying to think of other stuff that I've done. I do a lot of like higher ticket stuff at this point. So like, I am getting my life coaching certification, and with that is like some other stuff, like NLP is included with it. And then I also have done like just like one-on-one coaching, because that's what I preferred to do in the more recent months of my life. And so some of my favorite coaches, like Carrie Brady is my coach now, and I love her. She's awesome. So she has a lot of great programs around like sales and learning how to sell. Obviously, like, I love Bree Noble's stuff. Brianna Rellis has great stuff from the music side. So yeah, there's probably like a ton more people I could recommend, but it's a lot. DM me if you have questions about if you have questions about like a specific thing that you need support with. Like, I can send you a certain way if I can't support you with it.
Yeah. So, and with the whole like coaching and courses, right? Just keep in mind, like, even at the highest level, like people like LeBron James, he spends $1 million a year on his body, like with coaching and therapy and whatever else. And, you know, Rick Barker, who's been on the podcast, he talks about like always joining courses, being part of courses, and buying the highest level of those courses, so he has the most access to the person that's teaching the course. And there's so much out there, right? That you don't really know what is good, what is legit, what's not. Like, how do you figure out what is legit that you're actually gonna get value out of?
So this is where it really is about like connecting with the person. Just like we were talking about, like create your brand, show up, like people are connecting with you, not just the music. Whether it's music, whether it's courses, whatever it is, like you want to make sure that you are providing value in the thing that you're going to teach about in your course, and that you're also showing up as an authority. So like being able to show your audience, like, here's how I know what I know. Here are the results that I got my clients. Here are these testimonials. Here are these wins. Like that stuff is really valuable to not only showcase your expertise, but also when you're vetting someone out to be able to see, oh, they can get results for people, or here's how they know what they know. And also like, especially if you're looking for like a private coach or a one-on-one coach, which are generally like the highest ticket, the highest priced way you can work with someone, because you're getting the most access to them possible. And like a lot of coaches, like if you work with me privately, you get access to like my whole product suite. You get like a whole VIP day with me plus our weekly calls. So like there's a lot that people deliver in that. And when you're working that closely with someone, it's often not just about like what they can do and what I'm going to learn, but it's also like, I really admire their life and what they've created and their energy and who they are. And I want to be in that presence. I want that energy. I want to be able to do what they've done. So it's really thinking like big picture. And so again, looking at it from both ends, if you're vetting a coach, try to pick someone that you really resonate with, that you love watching their stories, that you love reading their content, that you know you trust, that you've really built a relationship with. And on the other side, if you are the coach or you are the artist, show your authority, post your testimonials, provide value, create a relationship with your followers, because that's what's going to get people to actually spend money with you.
Yep, absolutely. And then what is the courses that you offer for artists? And before I ask you the last question.
So you can look at my whole product suite at katiezaccardi.com/workwithme. So everything's there. But I have a bunch of different offers. Over the last year, I really took time to build out the product suite. So we had things at different price levels and for different purposes. So I have the Wealthy Musician Bundle, which I alluded to earlier, From Stress to Success, which is basically everything that I taught as a wellness coach bundled up into a course to help you go from feeling really stressed out, not being able to manage your time, to the opposite. I've got the Audience Builder Bundle, which is for anyone who is working on building their audience. So if you listen to this episode and you were like, I really want to launch something, but my audience is dead, they don't talk to me, it's like crickets, then I would recommend that you start there. I also have Out to Launch, which is a group program of mine that I run, the Out to Be Mastermind, which is mastermind that I run, and private coaching. Out to Launch and the Out to Be Mastermind are not currently open at this time that this is going to go live. But if you're curious or interested in either of those, you can DM me and we'll get you on the wait list. But we are actually going to be opening up private spots for May. So that is something that you have access to.
Are you coaching these or doing these courses live because there's a wait list?
Yeah, so Out to Launch and the Mastermind are both group coaching programs. Out to Launch is like a hybrid course and group coaching, but both of them are live programs. So we launch them at specific times. So they're not open all the time.
I love that. Another strategy maybe for round 3. But before I ask you the last question, just thank you so much for being on the podcast, coming back, and for sharing so much information, and also for being genuine, right, with your information and sharing, genuine and like, I'm forgetting the word, but someone that's like being willing to be open and share a lot. And I feel like, we've only met through doing a podcast. Like we haven't talked like offline, but like even besides the emails, but I feel like I trust you a lot with what you coach because of the information that you put out there, and you have a genuine personality. So just thanks for bringing that to an industry where there's just so much information to where you don't know what is legit and what's not, and where you don't know who to trust and who you can't trust. And again, like, for the listeners, I haven't directly worked with Katie, but I feel like that her courses are probably really, really awesome. And you're someone that I really admire what you bring out to our music industry. So thanks for what it is you do.
Thank you so much, Chris, for saying that. I really appreciate it. And sorry if you can hear my dog barking. He's trying to get in my room now.
Oh, good. I love it. It's time to go. So the question I ask everyone at the end is, what is your definition of making it?
I feel like I probably said the same thing last time, but I think that my definition of making it really is being able to show up every day and feel totally aligned and in sync and just happy with what you're doing. So, you know, it's going to look different for everyone, and it's also going to shift and change as to what that looks like. But I think that making it is really just being able to show up and like give your all doing what you love.
Live the life you love.